So let's talk about the basic conversation that we have with God. That's prayer, of course. And prayer is something that we talk about regularly here on the Inner Life. It's going to be obviously one of those foundational building blocks for the spiritual life. When we enter into prayer, the approach that we have to prayer, we have to have some sort of understanding of who God is. But we also live in a world where so many people, so many voices out there are trying to tell us who or what God is or who or what he isn't. When we want to have a right understanding of God, how do we differentiate? What are maybe some of the problematic but common views of God that are circulating out there that aren't accurate, that we should just be kind of on guard against?
Well, there's many. And basically to say that any view of God that does not look at him as a loving father is a distorted view, because that's the only way he wants us to see him. But one of the most common ways is, I kind of think of it as a slot machine in Vegas. You know, you put the quarter in and you pull the handle and then you get something out. So it's a transactional view. And that's just one of the most dangerous views, in which people say, look, Lord, I prayed 5 rosaries today. You owe me. Because I've done this, therefore you must do that. But we can never put God in our debt. And that is a very common understanding. If I do all these things, then God owes me health, wealth, blessing, grace, whatever. And that's just a very terrible way of understanding it. I think also sometimes asking God for what we should do ourselves. I mean, I know many of our students here at St. Bruno's School sometimes say, dear Lord, I had the math test today. Give me the answers.
Right.
That was my prayer when I was in school.
I think everybody's had that kind of prayer. Yep.
So, God says, do the homework and you will get the answers. So we don't want to ask God for what God has designed us to do for ourselves. I think sometimes people think that that God only listens to saints, that he would never listen to my prayers, that he would never, bend an ear to me because I'm such a bad person. Those are, I think, very common ways. I think the other way of distortion is saying that prayer is only the prayers that you find in books. The Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Memorare. And people don't think that they can just talk to God normally like they would talk to anyone. So I think those are all common distortions, and none of them deal with God as a loving father who always has our best interests at heart. The parent is not going to give the answers to the math test to their kid because the parent knows that it's better for the kid to do the homework. The parent would love for the child to just talk spontaneously to him at any moment. A loving father will always be available. So our prayer we have to direct our prayer to really this image of our Father who art in heaven. As Jesus says, a loving Father, and anything else is just not going to be effective and not going to help us put those Lego bricks together for our spiritual life.
Right. Well, so once we have that proper view of God, where do we start at that point then, so that it's not necessarily, we feel like it's only formal prayer or that our prayers aren't being heard? How can we approach that time that we spend in prayer so that it really is a true relational interaction? It's a dialogue back and forth.
I can tell you one of the most profound lessons that I received about prayer happened many years ago. I was in a parish, and I happened to walk over to the church to check on something, and I saw a man kneeling, head bowed, hands clenched, clearly in intense prayer. He was really praying intensely, I could tell, and I was glad that he was there. And I went back to the rectory, and a little while later, about an hour later, the doorbell rang, and I opened the door, and there's the guy, and he asked if we could speak. And he said that he had just come from across the street where there was a big hospital, and he had just been diagnosed with cancer. And he was praying about it. And he said, Father, I haven't been to church in 30 years. I'm not a religious person. but I need to talk to you about this issue. So we did. But then I thought to myself, this guy hadn't been to church in 30 years, was not a religious person, yet he was praying intensely for a full hour. I think a lot of parishioners would have a hard time praying intensely for an hour, but he was praying intensely for an hour because he was praying what I call the main thing in his life. The main thing in his life was he was facing death from this cancer. And so he was bringing that to prayer to God. I think anytime that you pray the main thing in your life, you will never be distracted. You will never think of anything else because your brain is designed to always put the main thing in front of you. So one way you can always begin prayer is before you begin prayer is to think, what is the main thing in my life? And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be financial problems, family issues, children issues, work issues, health issues, whatever it is. Just whatever is what is the main thing that's facing you right now? And if you bring that to God in prayer, just by talking in just normal conversation with God in prayer about that main thing, you will discover that you will never be distracted and that you will have a wonderful conversation with your best friend, your constant companion, who wants to hear from you. So I think the first thing is think about what is the main thing in your life and pray about that.